Half an hour on the Meridian on Wish You Were Here.
The small villages of Lynchmere and Linch sit quietly in the North Sussex and Surrey border countryside between Midhurst and Haslemere. Nobody seems to have decided for sure whether the name should be spelt with an I or a Y, and even local signs disagree about it. The name Linch itself comes originally from the Old English for a ridge or rising ground. And that's no surprise, for this is classic downland countryside. There's supposed to be a spot hereabouts, near the village of Hammer, where you can stand with one foot in Surrey, one in Sussex, and then lean over and put your hand into Hampshire. A bit too eccentric for me, even in a mad March week. The area retains some of the best and most tranquil qualities of all three counties, and still shelters true country people among the pads of the commuting stockbrokers and the haughty road hogs. A mile and a half from the nearest metalled road, John Northway brings home the groceries up a track which 600 years ago was the main Portsmouth to London road, when almost everyone travelled by foot. Here, deep in the woods and without electricity or running water, the Northways live a life of great and satisfying simplicity. They farm cattle and sheep and have a philosophy of life which today's materialistic multitudes would do well to heed. Did you adopt this way of life, or did it just adopt you?
Well, I was brought up into it. I came here as a small boy with my parents, and then I grew up with it, and I suppose because I'm a simple-natured person at heart, I accepted it. I like the simple life, and it suited me. So I came on into it, and when Father retired, I took over the farm from him.
What do you both miss about electricity?
Well, I personally miss nothing.
You don't like it, do you?
No, I don't like electricity. As a matter of fact, I'm terrified of electricity, so I'm quite happy without it.
What about you, Rosemary?
Well, I would like a vacuum cleaner. I must confess that is something I would like. An old house gets very dusty, and when you sweep up it makes a great puddle and you can't see across the room. But I would like a vacuum cleaner.
When did you two last go away together?
Oh, our honeymoon.
Yes. With the Isle of Wight.
Yes, we went to Ventnor in the Isle of Wight.
Yes.
Water is the one headache on an isolated farm like this. We do have a well, a very deep well actually. It's 167 feet deep. But unfortunately, we've had a long run of dry winters, not in the immediate past, but before that, and the well has run dry. This means that we're now either dependent on rainwater, which we gather from the roofs and collect in big water tanks, or we have to go to a private standpipe, which we have 1.5 miles away. So carrying water in bowsers from 1.5 miles away is a problem.
What happened to the mother, Rosemary?
Well, she died when they were born.
Oh.
They do sometimes. It was a rather rough birth, and she didn't get over it. She was exhausted. And they never really knew her, you know, because they never fed from her. We had to feed them right from the start. So they're used to the bottle.
They're quite small, though, aren't they? They're quite young.
Oh yes, I mean they're what? They were born the day before yesterday. You wouldn't.
That's sweet.
But they're wonderfully well up on their feet in spite of losing their mother. Now, let's see how much you've had. There's just a little bit more.
That's the sister, is it?
That's the sister, Totty.
And I've got
darling.
Tim.
You've got Tim.
Come on. Come on.
Why do you continue to live without any electricity, without any power, without a telephone?
Oh, we have a telephone.
We do have a telephone, yes, but we have no other amenities. Why do we do it? I suppose some would say we're mad, but we love it. It's a way of life. You see, I've lived here for the greater part of my life. Rosemary's lived here throughout our married life, obviously. And I suppose it's something that goes deep into your soul. I can't explain it any other way. But if I lived in a town, I'd be very unhappy indeed.
Outside his workshop at Holly Combe near Liphook, Gerald Whittaker keeps an 1891 steam engine, which he bought derelict 15 years ago and has now restored to its former glory. Inside, Gerald works as a sign writer and coach painter and is much in demand in the surrounding area for work of every kind, some of it of great intricacy.
You've got to make every brushstroke count, then that works on the speed at which you work. And also the type of brush you use helps to make the paint flow as well. It's all a combination between paint, brush and hand. The man that taught me was Bert Kelly from Godalming. He never asked at the interviews for the job like whether you were left or right-handed, but on the day one you started you seemed to be left-handed. And he was left-handed, so it worked well. The skills have come really over the years from working with other writers and other coach painters, and all the little pieces are sort of passed down through the generations. There's a good satisfaction when the job goes out the door. That's what you've got to keep aiming for, is keep on getting the work out and try and create something different every time. So no two clients can walk down the street and see the same colours or the same lettering.
When time allows, Gerald likes nothing better than to take his old steam engine for a spin in the company of his Springer Spaniel, Jake.
I first got interested in steam engines when I was about 12, 13. Bought my first one when I was 16. And I was reputed to be the youngest owner in Surrey at one point. We've sold the roller since years past, and now we've sort of worked on the Mistress. Spent 9 years as a long-term project, really. When I first found her, she was totally derelict. You couldn't stand anywhere in the tender. Basically, the boiler had it. There was very little of the motion work left. And it's just been a sort of long struggle going around the country. Just kept going at it. Just above the workshop is the Hollicombe Woodland Garden Society. There's a good collection of engines, and we're allowed to take the engines up and have a run round at any time.
In a jumble of huts, sheds and stables beside the village of Milland, Carol Diedman works on her 15-acre smallholding as the countryside shows its first signs of life in the early spring. Carol has lived in the neighbourhood for 30 years and keeps 2 Jersey calves, geese, black-rock hens, Muscovy ducks, 2 horses, goats, some donkeys, and Heidi, the Burmese cat. The goats are her main enterprise, and she sells the milk locally.
I've always had horses and I've always ridden, and then I thought about 20 years ago I'd like to have something else, you know, that perhaps had a little more return, and I went into goats and I've got really into those. My daughter was interested in the ducks, so we acquired the Muscovy ducks, and it sort of develops from there. Chickens for the house, you know, nice to have some fresh eggs. And then we thought we'd have some geese this year, so we've got some geese. Perhaps we'll have geese for Christmas next year. And it all snowballs, and you get quite a collection developing. But they're all very rewarding, and they all sort of fit in with each other like a jigsaw puzzle. I've always wanted a root chopper, and I managed to find one from a friend of mine had one a couple of years ago. And it's very useful because it means I can buy bags of carrots, mango wurzels when I can get hold of them, and chop them all up. And the goats, it gives them a succulent feed during the winter when they haven't got any grass or anything else nice to have. I keep British Sami goats. I felt, to me, they're the nice, placid, easygoing goat. They're very affectionate, and they like my hair. They think, especially after it's been shampooed, it tastes better. With all the herbs, I suppose, I use. One of my goats, Toya, has a real thing about dogs, and she loves chasing dogs, and it doesn't matter what you do. She will leave the herd to come out and deliberately chase the dogs. It doesn't seem to be done with any malice. It's just a great game.
On Iron Hill at Hollycombe near Liphook, Sue Slade goes out hunting for moles with her long-haired terrier Cinders, who's also a veteran ratter. This is popular riding and driving country, and Sue has worked with horses ever since she left school. Cleveland Bays, hunters and polo ponies. Today, she works as a master saddler in her tiny workshop and makes harness for all sorts and conditions of horses and people.
Yeah, I've always loved horses right from when I was a small child. I've learnt to ride when I was 10. They're just wonderful creatures, and once you've got the bug, it's very hard to let it go. Yeah. I've been with horses all my life, and I thought I don't really want to be mucking out for a living for the rest of my life. And saddlery is always something I've wanted to do. Circumstances just all fitted. I was working in a polo yard, and the end of the polo season ended just at the beginning of the course that I wanted to take started, and so it all fitted. When you're riding, your tack is very important. I mean, it's got to be in good condition because ultimately your life depends upon it, and if it's not in good order, then you're risking not only your own life but the horses and probably somebody else's as well. Everyone tries to put their own individual stamp on the harness that they make. There's a lot of scope, and heavy horse harness is even better because you can go really wild with the brass and the ornaments, and it's very satisfying to do that. Driving harness in particular is generally made to measure for the individual animal, and therefore, you know, you have to see the animal and measure it on site. Every job is different, every job has its own problems that you have to overcome, and it's very creative, and I find that very satisfying.
There's still plenty of firewood needed before the warmth of spring and summer arrives, and especially high on Lynchmere Ridge, where Peter Burkitt lays into the logs on a misty March morning. Up here, the wind and cold of winter are unforgiving, and it's the kind of climate for which Peter's fine herd of belted Galloway cattle, more used to the highlands of Scotland than the soft south, are well suited. They're known in the trade as belties. Peter's been hooked on these attractive animals for more than 30 years now.
I did my national service out in Kenya, and I was rather fascinated by the buffalo out there. And when I came home, I always wanted to do something with cattle, and I thought the Galloway was about the nearest of buffalo. Then Mrs. Windsor sold up her herd at Western Farm, Petersfield, and I bought Charlotte in October '66, and that's what started it all, really. I did have a red bull calf from black parents, and that was because the bull carried the red gene, and you do get this unusual occurrence of having red belties from black parents. And that bull now is actually up in Scotland, Ridgegap Rufus. He's done quite well, really. Galloways have a rugged look about them, and they're hardy, and I think they're great characters. There's a quality about them. It's difficult to explain, really, but they're very knowing sort of creatures, and I think they're more intelligent than a lot of cattle. Now in March and earlier on through the winter, really, I decided to give them more sugar beet than I'd normally do, because the hay was short and I was feeding more oat straw. And also, partly because of the quantity of acorns this year, I thought if I could feed them a bit extra, you know, keep them happy, they're less likely to go around rooting after acorns. I'm very proud of them. Yeah, it's part of my life, I suppose, really. As I say, I haven't done an awful lot with them. But I think the animals I've had, they've had good lives while they've been in my care. And I think it's important with animals that we treat them properly. A friend came to see me some time ago now, and he said, "Pete, you know," he said, "you're in a world of your own up there." He said, "You're just not with it." And I said, "Well, I'd rather be without it, really."
Foresters have worked these downland woods for centuries, coppicing, making hurdles, planks, building timbers, and cutting firewood. Deep in the woods below Liphook, Dougie and Winky Northway carry on the tradition today. Since they were small children, they've been venturing out with woodsmen and learning the tricks of their trade. Now they're foresters in their own right, and they work down a maze of tracks as far away from the rest of humanity as it's possible to be in the crowded south.
When I left school now, I actually knew a bloke who did the job, and he sort of offered me a job. I just sort of fell into it. I didn't actually plan it out. It just sort of happened, really. And I learnt the trade, and when my brother left school, we decided to go out on our own, and basically we've been doing it ever since. The plan is that the chestnut is originally planted, and once it gets to the age of about sort of between 10, 15 years, something like that, it's cut. And it actually regenerates, and it will continue to grow, and it will just keep on and on. It can be cut regularly every sort of 10 to 15 years. When we cut it, we just we stack the poles in the winter and that, and then all the sap goes out from them because it doesn't last so well and it's got sap in it. And once it's seasoned off a bit, we make it up into fencing.
The peeling machine is roughly around 30 to 40 years old. The things you have to watch out for is that you mustn't hold the wood too tightly, otherwise it'll tend to pull the wood in. You must never stand so that the blades are running towards you, because you'll end up in hospital like that.
There is obviously a great technique to cleaving the pales. Of course, I suppose it's a bit like riding a bike. When you can't do it, it's impossible. When you can, you wonder why you couldn't do it in the first place.
The fencing that we make perhaps won't be very recognisable as proper fencing after 15 to 20 years, but if the posts are changed, because they're the things that usually rot off at ground level first, then it will last probably 40 years.
When we point the pales, obviously we use a handbill, which does have to have quite a good edge on it. You do need a very good combination of hand and eye, really. If you can't hit straight, and you're likely to injure yourself. And that. So again, I suppose it's like most things with plenty of practice, you can hit just like that, and it comes quite easy, really.
I think really the countryside is the place to be, or perhaps the wilderness rather than the countryside. I think probably one of my greatest dreams or ambitions really would be to go to a place like Canada, to be a lumberjack in Canada or something like that, really.
In her Sussex book, Barbara Willard describes this county borderland as she found it in the early 60s. This frontier parish is well wooded, and the Arn names tell their own story. Mine Pit Copse, Iron Hill, Forge Lane, Hammer, and so on. This is extraordinary country. You can go there when the summer is over and the place is yours. It seems to be brooding and almost sinister. It has the odd anonymity of all borders. Choose the right day, and you can feel here that you stand within escaping distance of far more than a county boundary.